Hi guys, this is Daniel here. In this video, I want to talk about why I decided to quit my job when basically I had no plan and around about $50,000 in debt. Now, this happened around about 8 years ago now. So it's a long time now since I've had a job. I haven't had a job for 8 years now. And I've survived that whole time just being self-employed and kind of just doing my own thing. So back 8 years ago, I was 25 at the time. And basically the reason why I quit my job without a plan and with so much debt was basically because I had to do it. So I'd kind of always wanted to be self-employed. Ever since I was like 18 years old, I'd always thought I would end up getting into business, becoming self-employed, basically just doing my own thing. But from 18 until 25, basically that didn't happen. I just worked full-time job after full-time job. And I kind of put off becoming self-employed because I think I thought that I needed a really great business idea. I needed something huge that I could just jump into and just make tons of profit, and the whole process would be really easy. And then once I find that, then I can quit my job. That was kind of my plan, I guess. I guess that was my thinking between the age of 18 and 25. But by the time I got to 25 years old, I'd been having multiple full-time jobs, and my latest job, so the last job I ever had, was the worst job I've ever had. So at that organization, it seemed like that was where all the shittest people came to work. It was a kind of place where good quality people would get jobs in better organizations. So the only people that would work in this place where I worked was basically the shittest people you could find. So really just rude, arrogant kind of people. And it just wasn't an enjoyable place to work at all. So that was the latest job that I had. That was the last job I ever had 8 years ago. And I managed to work there for around about 11 months. And then basically, I just couldn't take it anymore. I kind of got to a point where I would rather be homeless on the street and still have my freedom than to remain employed in a place like that. That's kind of the place where I got to mentally. So I did have around about $50,000 in debt at that time. I did have a couple of little side hustles that were making a small amount of income, but they were making maybe half of my living expenses maximum at that time. And I had the $50,000 in debt, but still I decided to just quit my job and just figure it out because I couldn't take it anymore basically. And the thought of being homeless on the street, I was fine with that. If that was the worst case scenario, I would prefer that to continuing to work at that place where I was working. It wasn't necessarily the people there, but it was the idea of having a boss just in general. So I kind of got to the point where I just couldn't have a boss anymore. I just couldn't stand it. I needed to be doing my own thing. So I quit my job. Now I had $50,000 in debt, and I had a couple of little side hustles that were making maybe half of my living expenses going forward. So every week I was going backwards. I was getting more and more behind, more and more in debt. But I just made it work. I just hustled harder, and eventually I got those side hustles up to a point where they were making, enough to cover my bills and maybe a little bit more. They never made tons of money, but they made enough for me to get by. So that's kind of why I did it, was basically I had to do it. And it's actually worked out really good so far. So it's been 8 years since that point, and I haven't had a job since that point. Now, I'm not rich by any means at all. I haven't made $1 million yet. I'm still planning to make $1 million at some point. I haven't done it yet, but I have survived for 8 years, basically just doing my own thing and kind of barely working at all. Like, I've only done my own kind of self-employed kind of side hustles during that time. And I've probably only worked 10 to 15 hours per week during that time, during that 8-year period. And that's because that's how I prefer to live, is basically working less, but of course making less money. So I prefer more time rather than money. Well, at least that was my preference for those 8 years. My preferences are kind of changing now, where I would actually prefer to work a little bit harder in business and make a bit more money. I'd kind of prefer more money and less time, a little bit at the moment. So I'm kind of working towards that goal at the moment. But yeah, basically that's my story. Yeah, it's a pretty quick and simple story. So if you have any comments, any questions about this story, just hit me up in the comment section below and I'll be happy to answer your questions. If you like this content, a like on the video would be appreciated, and you can subscribe to the channel and I'll keep you up to date with any other content I put out. Cheers, guys.